And welcome to this month's episode of Immersed TV. And this week is a very special one because it is International Women's Day. So you may be wondering why Drew isn't here today, and that is because today is all about women and all about their achievements, so he didn't quite fit the bill on that one. And I'm your host today, Holly, and I'm joined by Evelyn from Standup Journal. Hello, Evelyn.
Hello, Holly. I'm so happy that you and I get to do a Immersed TV takeover today to talk about International Women's Month. This is fantastic.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much for being on the show today. And to celebrate International Women's Day this year, the APP wanted to spotlight some of the amazing athletes that we have on the tour, and there is a lot to choose from. And Evelyn, you were there since the very start of the tour. And can you remember, what happened on the women's side of things and the trailblazers that led the way for the rest of us? And, the likes of Candice Appleby and Annabelle Anderson. What memories do you have of women like that?
Wow, that's such a fun question, Holly. Certainly, Candice and Annabelle have been the front runners in the stand-up paddle competition world since the beginning. And, Candice just personally is somebody who inspired me to start racing myself. I was out at Dana Point, I want to say it was like 2000, maybe 2008 for the Battle of the Paddle, and just, was on the beach witnessing what was unfolding there. And after witnessing just such strength in the women and such, the competitive fire and their absolute commitment to the sport, I never stood on the beach again. I was always in the water, participating and competing myself. And, I have so much respect for both of them, the journeys that they've been on. In 2010, when she was able to sort of put herself into the sea of men, in the trials and begin to really break barriers for women. And certainly I've seen Annabelle do that again and again. In the beginning of stand-up paddle racing, there was nobody else but Annabelle, in multiple events. And just, but between those two women, I can't hold them in higher regard.
And before we introduce the amazing women we have on the show today, we have an amazing woman here. We have Evelyn. So Evelyn, from a media standpoint, how have things progressed on the female side of things in the sport?
Holly, I couldn't feel more privileged to have witnessed the scope of what's happened on the female side of the sport in stand-up paddling since I began as a paddler and then later, coming on board with Standup Journal. It's been exciting from the beginning to see how many women have decided to get competitive with regard to this particular sport. And just to witness its growth has been incredible. I mean, just seeing it all evolve has been, really something. I feel like women in the water sports arena are coming into their own right now. And it's a privilege, through the source of Stand-Up Journal. It's a privilege to be a part of that and to celebrate that.
So today on the show, we have some women that have really pushed the sport forward despite challenges that they've faced. And so today we have Fiona Wilde, Dominique Miller, and Lena Goutis. We're in for a massive treat. So Evelyn, I spoke to the one and only Lena Goutis, and I was so blown away by what Lena has achieved before she had children, but also while she was pregnant and after she had children. Do you remember the first year she was on tour and she took the world title as a rookie? Do you remember that moment?
I do remember it. And I remember everybody sitting up and saying wait a minute, what just happened? Who is this woman? She is one impressive lady. To be able to pull that off and be a mother of two little kids is just unbelievable, to fit in her training to maintain that level of fitness and completely be the mom that she wants to be. Lena is somebody I have so much respect for.
So let's welcome our first guest, Lena Goutis. Welcome, Lena. And let's start with 1 year after you won the APP Racing World Crown and took gold at the ISAs, you had your first child. So tell me about that period of transition for you.
Yeah. Before I started, I knew I wanted kids. So kind of the whole motivation of going after it when I did was that if I knew if I waited, it'd be too long. And I really, really, really wanted a family. So in some ways that quick instant success was perfect. because I was already, in my 30s, and kind of needed the quick success so that I could start a family. So although difficult, at the same time, it was perfect.
And Lena, you were globe-trotting to all these different competitions as an international athlete. Did you worry about the effect that having children might have had on the success you were having on the SUP circuit?
So I knew it would change my life, having children, and I knew it would change the athletic side of my life, and I was 100% okay. So actually, what I've done since having children has exceeded my expectations before I had children. So I really thought that it was, for me, going to be the end. So I had my 1 year of success, and then, yay, and now I'm done. Yeah. So I'm super happy that I was able to, that I wanted to, and that I was able to continue in some form after children.
Lena, as I recall, when you were newly pregnant, you were still racing and training on the circuit. Is that true?
Yeah, so I was really lucky with pregnancy. I really had really no issues. And so when I found out I was pregnant, I was kind of in the midst of already planned out the next 3 months of my racing, and I felt really good. And I just told myself and the people surrounding and my sponsors that I would just go with the flow. So if I felt good, then I would do it. If I didn't, I would stop. And it's kind of how it happened. And it kind of blew me away how much, energy I still had. And because you just hear so many different stories, and I was really lucky and motivated, I guess. I think it's both mind and body.
And Lena, you won some huge events whilst being pregnant. Was it empowering to, beat all these people while you were literally carrying another human being?
Yes, it did. In some ways, it just was like what I did. So it felt very normal, And then when you stop and think about it, you're like, oh, I guess what I did was actually special. But at the time, I just felt like that's what I needed to do, and that's what I did, and it was really great and fun. And then it's more like when you look back, you're like, oh, all right, yeah, that's pretty amazing. So yes, and I never did it with the intention of proving anything. I just was there and wanted to do it, and felt good, and yeah, it felt really great to be able to, share that with my son.
Lena, as one of the front runners of, one of the World Tour athletes that has had children while continuing to compete on the tour, we've had several other of the APP athletes give birth this year. It's been a really exciting year in that regard. What advice would you give them as a parent with regard to either training or lifestyle, and moving forward in the experiences that you've had?
I mean, you can do whatever you want. You have your goals, and listen to your body and listen to your heart, and do what feels right for you and your family. And I think it's not easy, and it's not comfortable. So be okay with adventure and uncomfortableness, and listen to your body and the people around you, and when it's so being open to adventure would be my biggest suggestion. But that it's possible, and not to compare yourself to other people. So every situation is different, and every family is different. So I like to read about everybody and get inspired and motivated, but then kind of look back inside and see what your situation is like, and see what you can do with what you have.
Lena, thank you so much for speaking with me. You're an inspiration to me and every single mother out there. So thank you, Lena. Now we're going to move on to some of the other extraordinary women that we have on the APP World Tour. And we're going to open up a question for all the girls, and just start by telling me some of the challenges you've all faced in your journey to becoming a professional stand-up paddle athlete.
I got sponsored by Starboard when I was 17 in the fall. So that would have been fall 2014. And that fall, I competed in one of my early APP events when I made podium, one of my first races in Huntington Beach, and actually made podium in the surf contest as well. It was just like dream come true. I had a whole thing with my parents that I couldn't, I could look for sponsorships and start conversations, but I needed to graduate high school first. So that all came together in the fall, and I told my parents, I was like, look, this is what's happening. I'm obviously gonna, graduate high school in the spring, but I'm taking this, I'm going for it. They were like, okay, awesome. And so come fall, I did one race and I was doing pretty good. And in the last 2 miles, I just bonked. I went from second to sixth, and I chalked it up to experience and, first time, like with a sponsorship and, with more eyes on me in terms of one of the ones at the top of the fleet. And okay, didn't really recover, realized that I was feeling pretty exhausted all the time. So I went home and I didn't get any better. I kind of got worse, just exhausted all the time. So I went to the doctor and explained everything that was going on. And they were like, well, has anybody ever checked your blood sugar? I was like, huh? What's that? No, like, what do you mean? And so I was like, what kind of test do I need to do? And all these different things. And he goes, no, just give me your finger. So he sticks out my finger, pricks my finger. And the number on the screen was 586. Great. So what's that out of? Like 1,000? 586 out of 1,000. That's pretty good. He was like, no. 120 is high. So right then and there, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And it was just, it was a shock. I didn't know how to exactly comprehend what I was hearing, that I am starting to be a professional athlete. This is my sport. This is my career. This is what I love. And my body doesn't work. So trying to put all that together in my mind, in that small doctor's office there, was just like too much, What's the plan here? Like if I go to Europe and race, is that going to be unhealthy for me? And my doctor just looked at me and he was like, that is not my decision to make. You know your body, you can do it. And I was like, okay, Dad, you're coming with me. We're going to go to Europe. And I went to Europe and won the first race. So it was just kind of like, okay, that was the best thing. And I did a short condensed version of my trip to Europe. So I spent the first year learning how to compete with diabetes, learn how to travel with diabetes, what diabetes meant, understanding how the changes affect your body, when you're racing versus when you're recovering. The next year, I was like, okay, that was a good trial year. I'm going for it. And then that next year in 2016 is when I won the women's racing world title.
I feel like nowadays it's a lot easier, I suppose, to be a woman of color or just a person of color than it was like 5-10 years ago. Before, it was really difficult. And if you weren't a top athlete, you weren't getting any sort of respect. Sorry, I don't know exactly what we can talk about or not talk about, but I felt a lot of discrimination growing up, being half Black, half Mexican, especially I look more Black. And it was very hard growing up on the mainland. And in the high school I went to, it was predominantly white. And a lot of the kids were super mean. It was super just kind of racist. And for me to be, the only way that I felt like I could fit in and be accepted is if I was a really good athlete. So I made sure that I was the best runner. I made sure, I was getting all county, all state, all conference honors. But yeah, so I always grew up around a very hardworking. I came from a very low income family. So the only way that you're going to make it out of where you were was just to work hard, just to put your head down and grind. And then, like I said, being in high school and just facing that sort of discrimination, the only way that I didn't and people treated me better and equal is if I was a good athlete. So I worked even harder than any of the kids on my teams to be the best. So going into surfing, like I said, I sucked at first, but I was super determined, because I had that sort of determination instilled in me at such a young age, to get better. And things that I really enjoy, I always wanted to try to be the best at. It might not come easy or it might not come right away, but I know if I put in the time and put in extra time that I can get to that level. I have so much belief in myself, and that's kind of what I feel like anyone listening or on here should feel the same way. If you believe in yourself, and if you trust your heart and what your mind is telling you, you can accomplish anything. I faced those sort of discriminations. I've never really in the water had people discriminate against me because I'm a darker skin, but I've faced, I guess, more sort of discrimination within the industry as a whole. And before Black Lives Matter, I just feel like it was, like I said, I don't know, they just didn't really, I don't know why they didn't really sponsor me or other people or choose to feature us. And before too, I never wanted to speak out. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the football player Colin Kaepernick, and he was pretty much blacklisted. He was like instantly kicked off the team. He had helped his team make it to a Super Bowl, and yeah, so he was kicked off the team, and the whole league was talking crap about him. I never wanted to be like that in the surf industry. I never felt confident to speak out and be like, hey, this isn't right. Hey, like, people of color aren't getting as much representation, because I didn't want to be like kicked out or blacklisted. I was always so afraid. So I was always just like, oh yeah, everything's fine and dandy. Everything's perfect. But until last year with the Black Lives Matter and the protests and people being like, no, we want to see more representation and more diversity. Like now, finally, I feel like I can finally speak out about it on my platform and like interviews like this. So
this is International Women's Day. It's not Men versus Women's Day. But do you think that men and women have to deal with different challenges as a professional athlete, Evelyn?
Different look at them. Women in world competitions, people are looking at their bodies. People are, sort of just experiencing them in a different way. And so, that whole body image conversation, for top tour athletes or for any woman athlete that's looking for sponsorship or any kind of support, it's a tricky question, because should that even be a part of the conversation? In my book, no, but it is something that, sponsors definitely play into a little bit. And it's that pressure, that extraordinary pressure on the female psyche, I think is something that, that our women athletes have to conquer on a daily basis.
Yeah, and it reminds me of speaking to Dominique Miller, who was in particular quite affected by the body image that surf media puts out and how you have to look a certain way and your body looks a certain way. And I feel we don't think of international athletes to be affected by those things, but they're all human. They're like me and you, everybody is affected by things like that.
There was a point, like, I feel like I'm pretty thin frame, but there was a point where I was like, oh my God, I'm just not skinny enough. Like I have more of an athletic build, I think, from my father, who was Black, but I was like, oh my God, my thighs are touching. Like these models, their legs are so skinny. They have like, their legs don't touch. Like, oh my God, like before having a butt was cool, I was just like, oh my God, I hate having a butt. I need to be skinnier. I need to have my hair straightened constantly. I can't have it out and curly. Like, I just always felt me, I'm not pretty within industry standards. Like, I'm not exactly acceptable, and for a long time I always felt like I never will be. I'm really stoked that I was able to be on a couple magazine covers this last year, hopefully in the future too. The younger generation sees that, because they can see themselves reflected and they can be like, wow, she's doing it, she looks like me, I can do it. She's on a magazine cover, like, wow, that's amazing. Like I said, like, I can do it. I see myself like represented within her. Like, I think it's really big. And I think this magazines, the surf brands, the world tour, I feel like the more they incorporate more diversity, the more a lot of these younger generations will want to do it and will tell their parents like, hey, I want to get into it, all this sort of things. But yeah, I had many people reach out to me as well, being like, wow, like my daughter or my son is so inspired now, they want to take surf lessons.
And Evelyn, what would be your advice to young girls coming into the stand-up paddle industry, or just the ocean sports industry as a whole?
So coming into the stand-up paddle or water sports industry for a woman, it's an interesting topic, because there's just, in terms of like the industry, the business side of things, there's not a lot of women. So, my advice would be, you really have to know your why. Like, why are you coming in? What's your vision? Where are you specifically going to create impact?
It has been incredible getting to know all these women a little bit more and hearing about their inspiring stories. And I already knew this, but it just reminds me that women are capable of absolutely anything. And it's so important to have female role models in the sport and across all sports, not only for the next generation to look up to, but wider in society for grown men, grown women. Everyone needs someone to look up to.
So, to the ladies out there or the young hopefuls coming up, I would just recommend that people think about really getting involved, not just as an athlete, but getting deeper into the specs, of each of these industries, so that we can have more female consciousness in there. It's so important. And now, we've had this great pause with COVID and the pandemic, and everybody's taken a big breath. So here's the opportunity for women now to, if they feel so impassioned, to step forward and to speak up and to become a part of what is coming down the pike. It's not a possibility anymore. It's definitely going to happen. So how can we impact the sport in a way that benefits the female gender as a whole? Thank you so much, Holly. It's been such a privilege to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Evelyn, and to all the ladies as well. Thank you for sharing your stories. We couldn't fit all of their achievements into this show because they have so many. So we have some more in-depth profiles on all of these women on the APP World Tour website, which is www.appworldtour.com, and of course on social media at APP World Tour. So happy International Women's Day, everybody, and do something today you never thought you could. I'm going to go and surf a big wave. Bye.